Okay. Hi, and welcome to today's HD Chat with Kelly Myskowski and myself, Jessica Shillingford. Today, we are talking about the projector invitation. So, Kelly, what is your experience with the projector invitation?
Wow. Thank you, Jess. I'm taking that as an invitation to share. Speaking of which, ah, I would say my experience with that is pretty vast. It's one of those topics that we could probably talk all day about. But what happened for me is in the course of my journey as a projector, not knowing I was a projector, I began to study human design and then got some education so that I could do some analyses for people as well. And once I perceived an invitation as an energetic opening, an opportunity for me to flow into and to participate, then I see my interactions in the world very differently. And I find that when I am in that flow and in that opportunity and opening, I do experience greater success, satisfaction, joy, happiness, and less conflict and rejection and dissatisfaction. And I'm not sure what kind of answer you were looking for. I don't know if you even had anything in mind, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Um, okay, so basically, what I'm hearing from you is that when you started to operate using strategy ultimately to basically be invited into things. For you, you perceive it or sense it as an energetic opening, which allows you to experience greater ease, flow, and therefore the projector success. Right?
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
so yeah, so for me, I firstly had what I call a spontaneous projector awakening. Some people call it Kundalini awakening. Some people call it, spiritual awakening. But I call it the spontaneous projector awakening because, on one hand, I learned to completely operate in alignment with my human design based on clearing energy and it just sort of spontaneously happening and me just sort of like opening up to my authority, like my inner authority, and taking like very intuitive aligned actions that led me to live in flow and greater harmony and peace and balance and opportunities that felt good for me. But that came after leaving um, my job as a teacher and working 70 hours a week. So the invitation, my first experience of this is contrary to a lot of the teaching in human design because my invitation comes from my soul.
Mhm.
My first invitation in terms of how I choose
Right.
decisions that I want to make, whether I want to train in Reiki, whether I want to spend a year doing shamanic training, whether I want to study metaphysics. You know, I take I get clear cognizance, so I get a very clear down. Even studying human design, that came to me in a download, and then an invitation came. But it was knowing that I needed to follow up on certain things and let things unfold uh, from my own inner knowing. Equally, talking about projectors being online and on social media, it's so important to understand that in real life, the invitation is really about your interactions with other people. So
Mhm.
the most impact is really exploring how it works in a relationship dynamic with the other rather than you choosing what to pursue in your life, what you feel called to do, um, and not looking for permission to study something or follow your curiosity, basically. Not tuning into an outer authority and looking outside of yourself, really learning. Human design is really about learning how to trust your own inner authority. So showing up online, we need to be visible. So if you feel inspired to share an insight or to write something or to create a song, there's nothing stopping you from sharing that because that being visible is what enables people to flow through you or to you to invite you to work for them or to invite you into a collaboration or to network. We're living in the technological age. So projectors need to understand how to operate on the online and virtual space in a different way, in the projector way, rather than just understanding it from in real life. So there's two different angles to come to when we look at the invitation for the projector, not just online versus in real life, but also in the different projectors that are, the different authorities that we have and how we
Right.
make those decisions.
Exactly. And I think you covered a lot of territory there, and that's all important in what we're here to discuss today and share with people, because it is a vast topic and our individual authorities also have a bearing on how we handle this. So, um, obviously, you're helping people primarily as projectors to be successful in the business world. And for me, I'm focused on helping people typically that are in the business world and have reached the point where that isn't it for them anymore. They're not successful in the way that they really need to be happy. They
Mm.
may have checked all the traditional boxes, but they're looking to make a change. And how do I navigate that change? And when they know who they are, and this isn't specific, I don't work exclusively with projectors, but human design is an aspect of helping them know who they are and how they function in the world so that they can find their next steps. So we're talking similar things, but with a little bit different focus in who we work with and how. And so there are the aspects of making decisions for ourselves as far as what's correct for us to do in the world or to do in any moment. Is
Mm.
it time for me to eat or time for me to rest or time for me to work or to play? Or, if I'm going to do any of those things, what am I going to do? All of the mundane day-to-day activities of daily living and, personal care and just having fun and having a balanced life. Then there's also the other aspect of interacting with other beings and interacting with the outer world in a way where these things our interactions can generate potentially more satisfaction and more success and more creation and more beauty in the world, or more conflict.
Mm.
um, if if we're not tuned in to what we're doing and how we're doing it in the way that best works for each of us as individuals. And, we've discussed before, there are no human design police. This isn't set in stone. No one's going to punish you for not following the rules.
I
What this
don't believe
is,
in rules.
wait, it's an experiment. And
Mm.
it's what we know or have come to understand. It's kind of a map or a tool to understand the energetics of how we be in the world and how we can be with greater ease and more joy and more prosperity as well.
Mm.
So, because our auras are deep and penetrating and we see others deeply, we tend to see them in ways that they can't see themselves typically. And they may feel that. It may feel intrusive.
Yeah.
And because of our unique perspective, we tend to see situations differently, and what is and isn't working in those situations, taking the situation in a very loose term is a system, perhaps, if we can call it that, because projectors are here in the broadest sense to study systems. So we're kind of studying the system at hand and may see where there's an opportunity for a better direction or a change, some sort of improvement. And so that's when it's about tuning into ourselves to know, is this the right time for us to say something? Is our insight welcome, and how is it going to be received? And therefore, are we in essence being invited to share our perspective and our wisdom?
I.
And when,
Mm.
I think we run into the most challenge with that is when there's someone else involved and we can see an opportunity for change, improvement, course correction, what have you, and they're not looking for our 2 cents. And if we chime in with it and we don't have a relationship with that person or situation that's already established where we know we can do that,
Mm.
then it might not go over good.
Yeah.
So Yeah, it's and there's just so much confusion about this, and I've run into projectors who are new to it that think they literally have to wait for some invitation, and they're sitting around waiting for something, waiting to be invited. And yes, we're waiting, but we're not waiting for a formal paper invitation to show up in the mail or in your inbox. It's not about that necessarily. It can be,
Mm.
but the invitations take on a lot of different forms. And for me, that's why I kind of summarize it's about where is the direction of ease for the energy that is me to flow the easiest? Where is it being called? Where is it being recognized? Where is it being welcomed? It may be at the refrigerator to open that door and grab a chocolate bar or a glass of juice or a glass of wine or a sandwich and nourish myself in some way or enjoy my time in some way. It may be that there's a business opportunity for me, or I might be invited to share a home or a life with someone, or go to lunch with a friend. There's all different kinds of invitations, but recognizing the invitation is the first step. And then knowing whether or not it's right for you is another part of the conversation. So maybe what I'm curious, how do you describe an invitation to somebody? How
Mm.
would someone recognize an invitation if you were to guide them in doing that?
Yeah. So, firstly, I like what you said about having a sense of your internal being. From because this is something. This is why it's so important for people not to get into the experiment. Like the guidance is tune into and learn from literally experimenting with situations from retrospect. Number one, where in your life have you experienced bitterness when you've initiated? So we look at it from a retrospective firstly, so you can get a context for what it might look like in your life. But then I think the most important thing is being able to tune into, in a Living Your Divine Design course, it would be literally telling people in real life to speak, to not say anything. In a work situation, experiment with not saying anything. And this is if you're in a work context, not if you're
Right.
in your house, because there's so many different contexts and nuance that's important. But I actually, so not saying anything and waiting to be invited to give your insight or your perspective and seeing how it feels to you when you wait and you're invited, or when you wait and you're recognized and you're invited. So, literally observing it from a metacognitive perspective with very conscious awareness, pausing, I know, contemplating, I would say,
Mhm.
experiment. So, here's a step like in this week, you're going to go to work, you're going to go to staff meeting, you're not going to say anything, you're going to observe what the difference is when you're invited or when you're not. And that's going to feel quite challenging, because if I had done this when I was teaching in a school system, there would have been so much, I would have understood how to operate in that environment in a way that would have been beneficial. But now I realize a lot of the bitterness and the resentment and the thing that I stored up because I wasn't understood was nothing to do with all the stories I'd created around why it was the case. It was just energetics.
Right.
And I talk about, but no, there was something else you mentioned that I thought was important. Your inner thing, signs and symbols. Okay, so when you're being invited from yourself or from connection to the quantum field, like I always say, projectors can respond. We can respond to synchronicities. Like my whole year of being guided, when I was wandering the earth, I was guided. Like I would have a dream, and then I would see the crab, or I would see a symbol in, like I would just have different perceptions. Those would let me know I was on the right path. So it's
Exactly.
multi-dimensional. It's like you were saying before we press record, we are more than our charts, and our way of um, determining information and reading and interpreting meaning and how to operate what's right for us intuitively, what's wrong, what's correct, what feels good, what leads to resistance, what doesn't, is based on being very present, aware, and conscious of the way that you connect with the language of the field, you know. But anyway, let me be really more specific around the invitation. Like, the invitation is not information. So if somebody's saying, like, this is one that I think is universal. I don't think it's me saying this is something you should follow. It's something I've observed. Try it for yourself. If somebody's saying to you, there's, oh, you're really good at singing, why don't you go and sing at this bar? That's not inviting you. They might recognize that you're a good singer, but that's not recognition and an invitation that is possibly right. It's information. There's a gig going at that place. So there's a slight difference there. But yeah, you've just got to really, really experiment and trial with it. That's the key.
And then there's also what was coming to me with that particular example is you could go to the bar and just see what happens while you're there and hang out. And maybe someone there will strike up a conversation and you'll have an opportunity to share that you do sing and then get invited to sing. So you never know what's actually going to happen when you follow these synchronicities.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the bar, let's say you do go, we'll just take this as an example. You walk in the door, then where do you go? Well, again, you can look for where does it seem to be the greatest opportunity for you. Does someone glance your way and kind of catch your eye, maybe head in that direction? Is there a crowd and they kind of part and look at you like they're acknowledging you in? It might be a networking event that you're at. So the invitation can be a glance. It can be people repositioning themselves to make space for you in terms of actually physically moving into that location, or which group do you then connect with when you get to the party.
But I would also say, oh, sorry, no, go on.
And then, an opportunity to observe and engage in conversation. How might that unfold? Someone might ask you a question. There might be a pause. For me, I didn't have that very defined awakening like you did. Looking back in my life, I always seemed to have a sense of this naturally. Not that there weren't mistakes or opportunities where maybe I could have chosen differently and had a more favorable, better feeling outcome. But I think, and that could also be my emotional definition, having played out all along, where I had a sense of reading the room. And I think, the other thing that's popping up here is sometimes we do offer our wisdom, and even though it's rejected, it doesn't mean it wasn't correct for us to offer it either. From a greater perspective, that person may have heard exactly what they needed to hear, and now they've heard it, but their response to it isn't necessarily because we weren't invited. It could be because they're not ready to hear it and they were triggered by it, like on a different, more of an ego level. So I think, as you and I were also talking prior to going live here, the more we can understand our strategy and authority, the more we can learn and grow and operate in a way where there's less rejection, more acceptance, therefore more success and less bitterness, and everybody's happier for it. But be willing to learn and grow from those experiences that are not as happy and joyful and favorable as we would have liked either. So it can come, literal. Would you like to? Here's an opportunity to. Would you be interested in? Please be here at this date and time. Those kinds of literal invitations. I'm offering you a job. Would you like to live together? Would you like to be life partners, get married, whatever? Do you want to have a baby? All of those things. It can be in different situation where you're in a group setting and, people just kind of acknowledge, you can tell that they've seen you. And you can migrate in their direction and see what happens. See if they open their circle for you to come in, pull up a chair, have a seat. Hi, how are you? They initiate conversation. And other nuances in social situations and interpersonal interactions. But then there's also what comes from within. What are you feeling inspired to do in the world and called to do in that moment? in a bigger sense in the world, but also in that moment, in that week, in that day. There's an invitation from your soul and from source to engage as well that is there for us to tend to in all of the ways that
Yeah, beautiful.
well,
So
thank you.
yeah, I am just going to read out a couple of questions and engage with them that we've had from the community.
Okay.
So one of the questions is, can magnetism bring forth more invitations at once? If this gets overwhelming, where can one rely on their chart to navigate these multiple invitations? So this is really great. A great question from my perspective is helping people to create aligned business models. You need to look at your unique chart. So for me, I have an open sacral. We all do with projectors, but I also have an open will center. So I've had to become wise around managing my own energy and really learning when, and obviously when enough is enough from my sacral, but from my will center, that was like, that's the thing that you need to decondition the
Mhm.
most. So it's like knowing what your capacity is, knowing that you're not going to be consistent, stopping creating situations for yourself that are not in alignment with how you literally flow in life, you know? So looking at, like, again, I'm open, so I'm open everywhere except for my spleen and my defined G center. So those are the only definition I have. So I'm looking at all of my centers to define, to determine, to understand how I operate. So it means I want passive income. I cannot have too many one-to-one clients at once. I need a lot of spaciousness in my life.
Mm.
So that, knowing that and living the last 4 years in that way, and also like actually self-sabotaging myself a lot because of the fear of burnout, the fear of like my body, like not wanting to work, even though I love creating the stuff I create. It's made me realize that I have to observe where I have the 28 going on, where the fear of like taking action, um, and making sure that I create a lot of spaciousness in my life. So basically, we only learn that by trial and error. You know, obviously, one to many teaching models is the best for me because it conserves my energy. And so I am focusing on creating passive like income revenue, and using my leveraging my knowledge and my wisdom to create products and services and tools that people can use that doesn't always require my energy, like my full on, because so centers is the first one basically. Also your profile. But basically the point is magnetism can do that. Have you set up structures and systems to be able to manage the workload in, efficiently? So what you're asking, that's from a business context. But if you're asking it from like just a social context, just go with the flow. When you feel tired, go to bed. Like, yeah, and enjoy it, and also know when to say yes. Can I follow through? So if you've got an ego, or inner authority from ego, you know, you need to really be tuning into your heart and saying, do I have the resources to follow through on this? Is this something I'm genuinely interested in? Are there any signs and synchronicities that show me this is the aligned step? For me and my spleen, it's just, I just know, or I know, or I don't know, you know? I mean, I know, or it's a no, and that's it. Um, can an invitation be initiated? And could doing this contradict the invitation? So for me, my take on this question is, you can create visibility in a space online, such as a Facebook group, such as a YouTube page, such as a podcast, website, a blog, however you desire to express your self creative expression. And that will, you know, that creates visibility. And then if you're living in true to your flow and you're at peace and you're inspired what you're creating, and you're, you know, you're creating a vehicle for clients to flow to you, then that is initiating, because you're creating the space. So it's not initiating. So we don't want to take this language so literally, you know. Oh no, I can't initiate, I can't inform. Of course we can inform. Of course we can respond, because they're just normal human being things. It's just about the energetics and how we feel when we don't follow when, like, if bitterness comes in, it's just not aligned. But I reach out to generator friends all the time. This is the other thing. Some people in traditional human design will say it has to be specific and it has to be once. It cannot be extended, and that's not true for me. It's just not my experience. I can reach out to any of my friends, my close friends, and yeah, and it's always love. So it doesn't work for me.
I love that. And what was in your answer from the first question about magnetism generating multiple invitations and then how do we handle overwhelm is that not every invitation is correct for us. So yes, magnetism can generate more invitations. We're drawing people to us. They will find us magnetically. And then, yes, we could potentially be overwhelmed. So it's a matter of discerning which invitations are correct for us, using our authority, using all of our synchronicities and signs and all of our intuition, which for me, and as we've discussed before, goes somewhat beyond the scope of human design, to determine what's correct for us, and also having our lives set up with those boundaries and knowing ourselves and knowing our capacity and knowing what works best for us. So for me, my work works best one-on-one because it's deep and it's powerful. So I need to be discerning about who I work with and how, and then they're going to get quality service. And I need to leverage that time as well so that I'm compensated in all respects for that time and that service so that I'm prosperous and recognized fairly as well.
That's good.
And then also
No, you go on.
with the, pardon me?
No, you go on. Yeah.
Okay. With the initiating, that doesn't mean you can't ask a friend to lunch or can't invite someone else to do something. It depends on the dynamic. The initiating may not lead you where you would like to go when other aspects of the dynamics are not aligned. If you were to, just walk in cold and ask for a job somewhere, you might get the job, you might not, or trying to think of some other ways. And when you're offering your unsolicited advice, there are ways to do that. You can say, I'm hearing your frustration. I have some thoughts around that. May I share them with you?
You could do
Yes,
that.
I'd love to hear them. Then you're
Yeah.
setting up, you're paving the way for the invitation, and they can say yes or go to hell.
Yeah.
The
thing is, like, you can
so then
do that. Yeah, but what I also find is just not bothering. Like, what is possessing you to have to go and tell them? Like, why can't you just observe and let them learn that? Not you, but in general, like, what is it within me that, like, yeah, we're here to guide people and we know that, and we have this desire to, like, be able to show them a better way. But is there a reason why we can't step back? Like, observe that maybe, because sometimes when you start observing that and just being at peace with letting people do their own lives, you get invited because you're living your own, you're focused on your own stuff. So that's another way of looking at it. But but obviously if you do feel called to do it, but again, like, feel into it. How good does it feel when you're like, why are you wasting? Because energy needs to be conserved. Like, so how can you optimize your energy? Just follow what feels good, I think, actually, is the crux of this. Like, follow what feels good to you. But there was something else, like, I wanted to talk about the 3 line and the 6 line. For us, sometimes actually following strategy and authority leads us into what is correct so that we can learn something from it. Even though, yeah, we went into it in the right way, it changed, the dynamics change and the things shift. So you get to, from the actual correctness of something, you get to learn something as part of your process. So there's nothing lost in life. It's just the more you can do what feels good for you and what fuels you, like when you're invited and you're rewarded, financially rewarded, where you're recognized, like the working with clients that send you messages that see you or that recognize you or that value, or like the dynamic of the relationship is like electric because you're bouncing off each other. That's what recognition's all about. That's what literally being invited into the best work, the best with the best clients is about. Showing up online, like frequency, having people reaching out to you. This is what this whole thing about being projector online is like having, just putting a video up, living your life in your joy, doing what fuels you, makes you feel creative, excites you. That's what, and playfulness, literally as much ease as possible is what gets people flowing to you on a frequency level.
Exactly. Because you're not putting up that interference and that energetic block. You're in the flow and putting all of that out, radiating that out. And along with this also goes the question, what if I've said yes to an invitation and then figure out that wasn't the correct one? How do I handle that? Well, that depends on a lot of things. That's interpersonal dynamics. That's you recognizing something isn't correct for you, and what is the maybe diplomatic way of bowing out of it. Maybe you'll need to be blunt. To me, that's entirely individual. And I was sharing with you earlier a situation that I was in that I knew wasn't aligned and I knew wasn't going to happen for me. I was not going to be participating, but yet I was still involved. So I was willing to experiment and just see, how is this going to pan out? There may be another reason that I'm involved, another opportunity or another growth experience. There was nothing potentially catastrophic or damaging or fatal that was going to come of this. So I continued on and I watched it evolve and I watched it evolve and evolve. And when it came down to actually being able to participate, we were going to do so online. I did not have a good tech connection and was not able to participate virtually. And just moments before, I was like, this is a no for me, but I didn't know what to say. So I chose to continue on and see what would happen. And it was taken care of naturally for me. I just laughed afterwards. I was like, thank you. That was so much easier than me trying to find the right words. You did it for me. Thank you. I love you. So you never know how it's going to work out. And you could end up with hurt feelings and whatnot, but you need to be responsible for you. You need to know you and how you operate in the world. And that isn't an overnight process. I mean, I'm still learning, and I'm sure, Jess, you would say you're still learning.
God, I'm the eternal student. I'm forever learning because there's always new things to see in different ways. But do you have an open spleen? I can't remember.
Yes.
So that's why I was laughing, because in my head I was like, oh, I'm holding on to things for too long that I know is not good for me, but I don't know how to get out. And I shouldn't laugh. I'm laughing because it is really.
No, but you're right. But and I was aware of it. And I was
awareness and embodiment,
experimenting with the nuances of, where is this coming from that this isn't correct for me? Because sometimes what is really correct for us, for our own learning, for the greater good, is going to push us out of our comfort zone. So I was examining that as well.
Oh yeah.
So yes, the open spleen, I'll hang on for dear life. And I will examine all aspects of it before I let go of it. But I'm also doing so with an awareness that I'm learning. But I have a defined root, defined emotion center, defined throat, and defined ajna. So you and I kind of complement each other a bit there. It was just interesting to see how it panned out. There's another situation for me where there's an opportunity there that I know my mind, my ego wants it to be the right invitation, but it's not. There are ways that I need to conserve my energy that this potentially could drain on, but I'm not saying no to it again. My spleen is like, let's see if this evolves, if something changes, so that I don't close a door permanently that I could never open again if it is correct.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
we each need to handle those situations for ourselves in the best way possible. And invitations do expire. Sometimes they expire before the party even starts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that again, it's like feel into it. It's like just know it. There was something I wanted to add when I was laughing. But what were you saying again? Just to remind me, so I can get my thought back.
Talking about my open spleen and hanging on for dear life.
No, yeah, the event. Okay, so there was all these electronic problems, resistance. So that
Right.
always happens as well. So there's two things I want to mention about that, and before we start wrapping up, one is, and if there's any questions there's three people watching. If there are any questions, put them in, and I can check on my phone, and then we can address that. And if not, cool. So one of the things is, um, oh, it's gone out of my head again. Sorry, remind me of what.
You were talking about interference
Ah,
in the
yeah,
online event.
resistance and the G
Resistance.
center. So two things, yeah. When if you're not getting clients or if invitations aren't flowing in and opportunities, sometimes it's not just being tired and all of that. It's having resistance. It's having an inner conflict. So if
Mhm.
there's an inner conflict within, and that's where the self-inquiry is useful to diagnose or
Right.
think, where's the no really coming from? Is it my body, or is it because of a belief around burnout? um but when you're physically not able to take or hold an invitation due to an resistance, and however whether that's foreign energy, mental body, in your chakra field, whatever, auric field, the situation will naturally work out for you. So like client might reschedule. Like if you're really, really tired
Right.
on that day, often a client will reschedule, and it's because your projector aura, like the energy has been like the universe is kind of working with you to say this, you're not open anymore. You're just not open for it. But the
Exactly.
other thing as well, so yeah, I think there was two things, but I can't remember the other one.
Well, what's coming to me, and whether this was the thing or not, I don't know, is finishing that out. It can be resistance, it can be timing, it can be an inner conflict, something with you. But it also, and that's what I love to work with my clients on, discerning, is this coming from a conditioning program and
Yeah.
fear and all your resistance showing up? Or is this true guidance that it's not the correct thing, or not the correct dynamics, conditions, situation, or timing? And for me, there's a lot that I've experienced around divine timing and what I offer the world, and the world being ready for it too.
Mm,
That creates, because of my need to be patient in that respect, I've gotten caught up in conditioning, feeling the pressure from the outside world when I see others doing so much and having success and whatnot. Then because of my openness, I can get sucked into that trap as well. So I need to come back to myself and recenter and ground in who am I and what's correct for me in this time. And my guidance comes in a lot of different ways. So yes, I'm emotionally defined. For some things, I have to wait out my emotional wave. Some things, before I'm even at the point of actually making the decision, I've been playing with it in contemplation of that before I'm even in discussion around what the options might be. I know how I would feel about that. Then when we get to the details, I get a little more quicker response. But sometimes I just have a knowing.
yeah.
Sometimes there's just something about it, like I know it is or it isn't going to happen, or I can have a way of feeling into the future to feel if there's anything beyond that point that's difficult to describe. And it's like, no, that's not happening. Or, I knew when my mom was going to pass away. I mean, she was sick, she was terminally ill, but I was working with family and trying to make some decisions, and I'm like, we've got about this much time. And I was right, because I didn't sense her being there after that. That's a whole different thing. And where we feel it in our bodies is also showing us the type of conflict that we're experiencing. You know, is our stomach upset? Are we having trouble kind of digesting what's going on? Is our
Mm.
neck feeling a little bit stiff because our heads are telling us one thing and our bodies, our hearts are telling us another? That's not a coincidence. So I help people connect those dots as well to learn you have a lot of different ways information can be coming to you potentially.
And again, I feel like it's just a spleen day today, then, because again, this is another story of the spleen. Like with that open spleen, you have multiple ways of sampling
Right.
and experiencing intuition. And actually, even with my own defined spleen, which is why I have such a sense of ground, like I have such a sense of knowing, and
Yeah.
why I believe I can trust because it's consistent for me. My intuition is consistent. And now I've been living my design, it's like, it's that
Yeah.
gives me that deep sense of trust. And it's a cellular thing. I can rest knowing something's going to come or something's on the way. Or if I let go of this thing, like sometimes, you know, as you guys know, I keep repeating the same story. And actually, I know there's hello to new people in the group because there's a few people coming in because I'm going to start a series on that spontaneous projector awakening. And there's loads I want to talk about on the invitation, but we'll talk about it another time. But yeah, it was important to be able to understand how you get information and trust that so that you can get a deep sense of rest and restfulness and readiness and co-create in a very dynamic way, which I call like riding the magic carpet of life. And that is strategy, authority, and understanding conditioning and how it's showing up for you. But really, the core is just getting deep into the body and knowing your signs and how you can connect. There was one comment, so let's just have a look at what Shannon said. There's an inner conflict, especially around building membership program and mastermind. I honestly feel called to work as a barista until further notice. So we would have to understand how to guide on that one. We'll talk anyway because we're going to actually talk. But it would be like, what's your inner authority? Can't remember if you told me already. Um, and timing. Projectors having an internal sense of timing is so important and so vital um, for understanding that we do flow in our own timeline. I talk about this a lot, being in your own timeline and knowing when to take action, when to hold back. Again, it helps you to navigate life in power as an aligned projector. Because when you
Mm.
understand your own inner timing, like I set up the Projector Success Hub in February last year, I had like the instant inner knowing that it had to be set up, the group, but I knew I wasn't ready. There was a knowing. It was like, and when I was guided, like when I opened it in November, again, it was on that impulse. So because I don't have, like, I don't because I've spent so long now living like this, it's like I don't have doubt. I don't turn it inwards. I just,
Yeah. I missed what the comment was. For some reason, you froze up, and I'm not sure if it was my internet or yours. So I'll take your word for it. I have an inner knowing and trust in what you shared, Jess. If you want me to chime in, I'd have to ask you to reread it for me, please.
it's okay. It's basically, the lady was saying um, she has an inner conflict around setting up one of her business ideas, which is a
Okay.
membership and a membership program, and whether she should just work as a barista and
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely. Timing and flow.
timing and flow. So let's just sum up. What are some of the key ideas we've taken away today? So, um, yeah, let's begin with number one, the projector invitation. Make sure that you can discern whether you're being recognized first and invited. That's number one. Like, what does recognition feel like for you? What does being invited feel like for you? How do a retrospective analysis of times where you have given unsolicited advice, where you reach out to people, or where you try and initiate things in real life when you're connecting on an interpersonal level, and reflect on what that felt like and times where you have been invited, and what projector success feels like for you, because it's all about you. There are no gurus. You are the guru. The human design system provides tons of brilliant information, and you've got to verify things for yourself. You've got to experiment, and live your life in your own way, and not be guided by external noise, basically. Right? It come really, you are your own guru. So that's really the key.
Exactly. Exactly. Beautifully said. And knowing if those invitations are correct for you really relies on you. Nobody else can tell you. Somebody else can hold space while you're discerning it, but you need to know for yourself. And it's an experiment. Have fun with it. Be curious with it.
I
Be
think,
willing to play with it.
sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I wanted to also say, when invitations are not flowing, look at releasing bitterness, releasing thought forms or ideas about your own sense of self-worth. Look at stories that are going around your mind. Like, what meaning are you making that? And look at burnout, look at your physical condition, look at tiredness, look at those things if you're not being invited into things or opportunities or clients.
Right.
Um,
And that's about being brutally honest with yourself.
mm,
Where am I not being honest with myself? Where am I out of alignment?
yeah,
What am where am I shoulding myself?
yeah,
Telling myself I should do this because it's tradition, because it's what I was told you do, because it's what I've always done. Those are some other areas where this can come into play, and we're not living in our authenticity.
and where are
Definitely.
you lacking self-belief in your own, like, capabilities, your own level of like your own ability to co-create, sufficiency for yourself, like, all of that. Look at that. But is there anything else that we want to sum up with in terms of the invitation? um
Well, my invitation is for you to reach out and ask questions, ask for support for anyone that's listening to this live or, down the line as a recording. That's what we're here for. I'm Kelly Myskowski of Inner Light Transformational Coaching and Craniosacral Therapy, and you can find me at letyourinnerlightshine.com, all lowercase, all one word. And reach out with questions. I'm happy to help. Happy to help.
and I'm Jess, and if you're not in the community, the Projector Success Hub, please come over. That's on Facebook, or if you're looking to work with me directly, you know how to find me: Instagram, Facebook, message me, which is how you always do it anyway. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll probably come back to this because there's so much to talk about in terms of this.
Yeah.
And I really do want to talk, and I will be creating some videos talking about my experiment and how it's literally real life examples of how this has worked out for me, and that might be able to provide insight for you. So thank you so much for your
Yes.
time today, Kelly. Um, yeah.
Well,
Speak.
thank you for the opportunity and the invitation, Jess. And I look
It's a
forward to
pleasure.
more. Take
Oh,
care.
I wanted to talk about actually projector, male to female relationship invitations, but we'll 'cause my longest relationship was with a projector, and I invited him, but this was before knowing about human design. Anyway, loads to talk about, so
Okay. Sounds good.
we'll pick it up another time.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.